Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the motion on the order paper. Madam Deputy Speaker, right at the centre of this motion is a single word: trust. The trust that the party opposite lost with the British electorate. They lost it when they promised not to put taxes on farms and did so, when they said they would not be means testing the winter fuel payment and yet did. And they did it also, Madam Deputy Speaker, when they said that they would not be putting up taxes left, right and centre, but did exactly that when they came into office. Indeed, in their own manifesto, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's around £7 billion worth of tax increases. That's translated by the time of the first budget into some £40 billion of additional tax. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, much of that related to national insurance, employers' national insurance, a clear breach of the Labour Party manifesto. Do not take my word for it, take the word of Paul Johnson, the former head of the IFS, who, and I quote, said of the manifesto and that particular tax increase that it was a, quote, straightforward breach of the Labour Party manifesto. Now, the Chancellor also said that she would not be taking decisions that would affect working people. And yet we know, with the figures released just yesterday, that unemployment it is now at a 5-year high. 180,000 fewer jobs on payrolls on her watch. And indeed, some sectors particularly badly impacted. Hospitality, some 90,000 jobs destroyed, particularly affecting the youngest people in our country, those desperate to get on that first rung of the career ladder, deprived of that opportunity by the ministers opposite. And of course, after that calamitous budget, Madam Deputy Speaker, there were further pledges and further promises from the Chancellor. She said to the Treasury Select Committee, and I quote, "We are not coming back for more tax increases." She said on Sky News that she would, quote, "wipe the slate clean." And on the 25th of November at the CBI's annual conference, she said this: "I'm not coming back with more borrowing or taxes." There has been little of that language of late, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I think we all know why. At the October budget, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor also said something else that was telling and extremely important, and it is worth me repeating it in full. It relates to her pledge, her clear pledge not to extend the freeze of the personal allowance under the income tax regime. She said, "I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds." So could I ask the Minister, when he comes to the dispatch box, will he reconfirm the solemn pledge that the Chancellor made in that last budget? He could intervene now. Now, of course, he could intervene now, that's true. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, what we know is that the Chancellor has messed up the economy. And yet we are now already just about a year into this government into the blame game. The Chancellor held an extraordinary and rather confusing address to the nation recently in number 10 Downing Street, in which she sought to blame everybody for this fiasco except for herself. She blamed Brexit. She blamed Donald Trump. And when it came to future downgrades of productivity by the OBR, she even had the temerity to blame this side of the House, blaming the past for the future. I was half expecting her to blame World War II, or the Great War, or the Boer War, or perhaps the Battle of Hastings, which surely, with the harrying of the North, must have scarred our economy, and that must still be being felt 1,000 years later.
No, it was definitely the Korean War.
It was the Korean War. My right honourable friend is absolutely right. So these are her choices that have led to this situation. She was the person that chose to put up taxes on jobs, which has led to growth being anaemic. And of course we know that taxes like national insurance feed through to lower investment, to higher inflation, to higher unemployment, to lower real wages. We know that they talked down the economy with this absurd and fictitious £22 billion black hole, which, and the sweet irony of all, when they asked the OBR themselves to come in and opine on that number, said they would not legitimise it. And they have borrowed. I will certainly give way to my right honourable and gallant friend.
And agree that the real downfall of this government dates from the fact that they would not face down their own backbenchers and deal with the rocketing benefits bill. Frankly, the country is going broke, and this government has got to have the courage to deal with millions of people who are not contributing to society.
Well, my right honourable friend makes an extremely valid point, and I shall come to these matters shortly, because there are alternatives, of course, to what this government has decided to do. It was this government also that went on this reckless borrowing spree. We now have a situation where we have borrowed in this year £100 billion, that being the highest borrowing, excluding the pandemic, in our history. And why has that happened? Because the Chancellor has fiddled the fiscal rules. She has changed the debt definition from public sector net debt, as it was under us, to public sector net financial liabilities, which allows far more borrowing. In fact, under the original definition that we had, that she incidentally said she would not change, she would have been underwater on just about every year of the forecast when it came to the debt target. And that recklessness, of course, has led, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the party opposite having plans to borrow £500 billion more over the period of this Parliament than we had in our plans that they inherited. And I will give way.
If I, just to put this in simple terms for those listening at home, the Chancellor raised taxes by 40 billion, she spent 30 billion, and she borrowed 70 billion. Cumulatively, when you look at that, someone is thinking, well, how am I going to get the return on that investment? Am I going to see if we're not growing the economy? How do I ensure that the interest is going to be paid? And that's why the interest payments go up, which is why we end up paying more debt as a country, because of the decisions the Chancellor has made.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. If you borrow more money, Madam Deputy Speaker, you pay more for that borrowing. And of course it has also fed through to inflation. We know inflation at the moment this year is the highest in the G7, according to the IMF it will be. And the IMF also says it will be the highest in the G7 next year too. And the consequences of that through monetary policy, of course, is interest rates being higher for longer. And if you have a mountain of debt that you're ruinously adding to, of course, the servicing cost of that debt is going up through the roof. It now stands at about 100 billion a year, rising to 130 at the end of the scorecard. That's over twice what we spend on defence every year. Will you give way on that? I will certainly give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to the Shadow Chancellor. He's laying out compellingly the calamitous choices that were made at the last budget. And would he agree with me that fundamentally underlying it is the most calamitous choice of all, which was a strategic decision that the public sector would be expanded and the private sector would be contracted? And the crowding out of the private sector is what's resulting in this doom loop that we're trapped in, because we've got fewer and fewer wealth creators and businesses paying for this bloated public sector, and their ability to shoulder that burden gets weaker by the day.
Well, my honourable friend makes an extremely incisive and correct point. If you spend huge amounts of money as a government, there is an opportunity cost to that, and it comes through in various forms. I will momentarily. Comes through in various forms, including, as he rightly says, crowding out both of capital, raising the cost of capital, and crowding out labour as well, and crowding out skills and so on and so forth. So it's a fine and important balance to get right. And this government palpably has got it wrong. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the right honourable member for giving way on that point. The honourable member for Hinckley does raise a fair point that when raising public revenue, one should at least expect a decent return on that spend, whether that be a social return or otherwise. But does the right honourable member not consider investing in our NHS to be such a decent return in that respect?
Well, what matters, Mr. Speaker, and the right honourable gentleman's question actually identifies the core of the fallacy of his own government's approach, which is to assume that getting better outputs is all about spending ever more money. It is not. It is about what you do with that money. It is about productivity. And what the government did, of its many mistakes, Madam Deputy Speaker, is when it came to office, it splashed out on pay rises for its trade union paymasters, 14% for the railway drivers, 22% for the junior doctors, with not one string attached in terms of increased and improved productivity. And therein lies the answer to the honourable gentleman's question. I'll take another intervention.
Giving way again, does he acknowledge the massive deadweight loss caused by some of the strikes ongoing in the NHS, unbelievably under the last government? Will he acknowledge the deadweight loss and the negative returns as a result of some of the previous governments?
I'm surprised that the honourable gentleman would have followed up what was not the strongest first question with that particular question. Because, of course, what we know is the naivety of the government in thinking by simply buying people off with no strings attached, the problem would go away. It's like feeding the meat to the wolf. When you feed the meat to the wolf comes back to your door the next day, and that is precisely what has happened. We're not seeing industrial relations improving at the moment. We've got various unions in the public sector threatening to strike, including in the NHS, where he started with his first question. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, where has all this led? It's led to lower growth. And no matter how much the front bench may trumpet increased growth, the reality is that growth per capita, which is the honourable gentleman says it's the highest in the G7. Growth per capita is the second lowest in the G7. Exactly. And what matters is growth per capita, because that is what drives an improvement in living standards. And I have more bad news for the honourable gentleman who continues to chunter from a sedentary position. That the IMF says that next year growth per capita will deteriorate even further and be the lowest in the G7. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Can I first of all commend the Shadow Chancellor and the Conservative Party for bringing forward this debate? Is he aware of the stats? The average British family is as much as £15,000 poorer than they were 5 years ago. Biggest increases have been energy and food, of course. And while there has been wage increases, all that is swallowed up in the cost of living that we have. Does the Shadow Chancellor share my concern for the working tax and the working family, the class family, those who are worse off now than they ever were? And does he share the concern that I have from my constituents that any tax increases coming from the Labour Party will push those middle class families towards the poverty line, and it could mean that some of them will be unable to pay the bills that they're just about paying at this very minute?
I agree with the honourable gentleman's observation. Of course, higher taxes are bearing down on living standards, but so is inflation. And if you look at this high level of inflation that we have, the highest in the G7 and forecast to be the highest next year in the G7, within that sits food inflation. It's running way above the headline rate of inflation. And who does that impact the most? It impacts the very people that the party opposite profess to stand up for the strongest, the poorest in our society. And it's a direct consequence, I will in a moment, a direct consequence of the policies pursued by this Chancellor. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Does the Shadow Chancellor recognise that the last government was the only government in living memory where real living standards reduced over the course of 5 years? And does he accept that the difficult situation we're in on the cost of living is in large part to his government's decisions over the last 5 years?
No, I don't. There were many great things that the last government did, not least creating employment as a job-making machine, not least, despite the Russian-Ukraine war, bringing inflation down at the back end of 2022 from 11% down to bang on 2%, bang on target on the day of the general election. Where is it now? Almost twice that level. We improved education in our country beyond all measure, and it is his party who is now undoing those reforms, and we will see the consequences of that for generations to come. We did many things for which we should be proud, not least getting us through COVID, getting us through the inflationary times. And on the day of the general election, we had the highest growth in the G7. We had near record levels of employment. We had a near record low level of unemployment. We'd seen 13 consecutive months of improving real living standards. That's not a bad record, and I give way to my honourable friend.
Very grateful to the Shadow Chancellor for giving way. So far, the party opposite doesn't appear to have mentioned COVID. We reduced the deficit by 80%, which enabled us to spend £373 billion supporting households and businesses during those years. And businesses in my constituency that would no longer be in business had it not been for that support. What does he think would happen if, God forbid, we had a similar event right now? The answer is, I suspect he's about to tell me, that we simply would not be able to manage to sustain households and the economy in the way that we did.
Well, my honourable friend is entirely right. And the conclusion that one must draw of the mess that this government has made of our economy is that it has become very brittle and very fragile and very vulnerable to the kind of external shocks that we were able to withstand when we were stewards of our economy. And Madam Deputy Speaker, per capita growth almost down on the floor, unemployment at a 5-year high. And as we know, every Labour government in history has left unemployment higher when they left office than when they found it on entering office. We've seen inflation high, and we've seen rock-bottom business confidence. The IOD, in one of its recent surveys, found that amongst its members, business confidence was the lowest in history, and my honourable friend refers to COVID. Business confidence, according to the IOD, is even lower than it was during COVID, when the economy contracted by over 10% overnight. That is how bad business sentiment is out there, and I will give way.
Is it as surprised as me to hear the Prime Minister again say today in Prime Minister's questions that his main number one goal is growth? All the evidence is pointing against it.
I think, to be fair to my honourable friend, I think the Prime Minister was referring to facial hair growth rather than growth in the economy. I think they are distinctly different things. And, well, he may or may not be. Well, that remains to be seen. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, what all this ends up with, of course, is lost fiscal headroom. And that's the story so far, that we have a budget in October of last year with about $10 billion against the debt target. That it vanishes, and a 50% on top as well. It's rebuilt in the spring. And now it's all disappeared and more, and we're waiting to find out how deep that black hole is. And we've entered something of a doom loop. Higher taxes, destroying growth, leading to a loss of fiscal headroom, requiring, in the Chancellor's terms at least, further tax increases, leading to further destruction of growth. And round we go. I will give way to the Honourable.
For giving way. He's spent a lot of time in this speech talking about what people have said and done. I wonder if I could remind him that just a month ago he said that if he were in the Chancellor's position, he would raise income tax. And how does he square that with the speech he is currently giving?
Well, the honourable gentleman, I'm pleased, has given me an opportunity to correct the record, because I know it was spun by the Labour Party that at a fringe meeting at the Conservative Party conference, there was a very long and extended debate about just how bad things were, and speculations about all the what-ifs and maybes of different scenarios and so on. The point that I was very clearly making, if he reads the full transcript of those exchanges, was that there's an alternative to putting up taxes, and that is controlling spending. And that was the point that I was making. And what is happening to the wealth creators, Madam Deputy Speaker, in our country? About 16,000 of them have fled. They're going by the day. And these are people who generate the wealth and the jobs and the growth that we're all striving to achieve. And of the 16,000 that have gone, if you look at the cumulative tax take that's just walked out the door, it probably requires 1/3 to 500,000 people on average earnings to fill that gap. It is not sustainable. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an alternative. And the alternative is what my party set out at our party conference. We set out a way forward in which you control government spending. And you can control government spending to the tune of at least £47 billion, which were the savings that we identified. Of that 47 billion, 23 billion can be found from the welfare budget, getting people into work, and of benefits. I'll come back to the honourable gentleman momentarily. Getting people off benefits and into work, something that's better for the economy, but equally for those who have mild mental health conditions, mild anxiety, mild depression, ADHD, a better outcome for the individuals concerned, rather than parking people on benefits as the party opposite is doing through time. Focusing on actual need rather than simply transfer payments. Focusing on medical diagnosis rather than self-assessments. And not paying benefits to non-UK citizens. Those are real savings that can be made. And in some cases, they are tough choices, absolutely. But these are decisions that the party opposite has done. I'll take the gentleman who stood first. Yeah.
Thank the Shadow Chancellor for giving way. He'll, of course, remember in his time as the Work and Pensions Minister, where he oversaw a £33 billion increase in the welfare budget. Yeah. So, of course, he's talking about cuts now. He's not talking about welfare cuts because he had the opportunity to do that and failed to do so. He's talking about cuts to teachers, cuts to nurses, cuts to our armed services. Which of those three areas is he talking about cutting right now?
Okay, well, I'm glad the Honourable Gentleman has raised my tenure at DWP when I was Secretary of State. I was very clear that we needed to arrest the rising welfare bill, and we took through legislation. No, we did actually. We did arrest it. So we made changes to the work capability assessment, which the OBR scored at £5 billion worth of savings, and the OBR also scored the fact that there would be 450,000, almost 500,000 fewer people going on to those benefits as a consequence. We had already started a consultation on personal independence payments that I will come back to in a moment, and that was interrupted by the general election. The first thing that his party did when they came into office was to scrap all that, and then come forward with some ill-thought-through proposals which didn't survive contact with the government's own backbenchers. There are other areas where we can make savings, Madam Deputy Speaker. The size of the civil service. It's grown by 37% since 2016. We can cut it back by 25% and make about £8 billion worth of... the gentleman opposite should listen carefully to this, because if he is about to sit on those benches on the 26th of this month and listen to his Chancellor come up with some pretty unpalatable things, these are good alternatives that should be taken seriously. Raising taxes, Madam Deputy Speaker, is simply a choice, and Labour are too weak to make the choice around controlling spending, and so they fall back on taxes. The welfare reforms that they brought through, they had to U-turn on. £5 billion added to Labour's black hole in an instance. We've seen the Timms review of personal independence payments, and we've just seen the terms of reference for that. And that shows quite clearly that there is no intention of saving any money from the pit budget. That is grossly irresponsible. It is spiralling ever skyward. The two-child limit. It is highly likely, from what we hear, that that will be scrapped, abolished. Why? Probably because the Prime Minister, shackled to his Chancellor, is feeling that he's been squeezed halfway out the door of number 10, and he better do something to settle the troops on the back benches. But that comes with a price tag of £3.5 billion. The only choice that this Chancellor is taking is to fail to get on top of spending and to put up taxes in order to fund ever more welfare. I will certainly give way.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable from giving way. The Chancellor often talks about taking difficult decisions, taking tough choices. Does he agree with me that it's not a tough choice raising taxes on other people? The tough choice is cutting spending.
My honourable friend absolutely goes to the core of it. This government, despite their majority, and this is an extraordinary point to arrive at, does not have the plan or the political will or seemingly even the ability now to command enough support on its own benches to push through vital spending controls that would allow us to get the taxman off the back of businesses and people up and down our country. I will.
Child poverty increased enormously on their watch. Yes, it did. Where was your political will to deal with it?
I think the honourable gentleman should look at absolute poverty after housing costs, and he will find very significant reductions of children, pensioners and across the piece during the vast majority of our time in office. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Sorry.
I do expect members to be here for slightly longer. So Mel Stride.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, that's a great shame because the honourable gentleman hasn't been here for any of the debate, but that doesn't mean that he might not have given the best possible intervention from his side to date. But perhaps we'll wait a little bit. He might like to come in a little bit later. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a government engaged in serial breaches that has no backbone to take the right decisions, will always fold to pressure, including from their own backbenches, and all at the expense of businesses and hard-working people up and down our country. I will give way a final time tonight.
I'm grateful to the Shadow Chancellor, because isn't actually the crux of this is the Chancellor set out in a speech only last year saying it's an absolute commitment not to raise taxes. She went on to say, we have set the spending envelope for this Parliament. We do not need to increase taxes. Full stop. Yet here we are on the cusp of taxes going up in 2 weeks. Isn't the fact is she can't even stick to what she promised?
Yeah, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and he will have been aware of the various quotes that I gave at the beginning of my contribution this afternoon, exactly to that effect. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we say today the question on the order paper is a simple question, and it is essentially this. Even at this late stage, will the government stand by its word, or will they dragoon those on the benches behind them through the wrong lobby tonight? If they vote with us, then millions will heave a huge sigh of relief. If they vote against, then the people will have their answer, and they will never forget.